This is episode 45, and we're joined by Tom Secker. He previously appeared on the podcast in episode 12, and recently wrote an article for our website entitled The Mutation of Operation Mockingbird, so we'll definitely be sure to ask him about that, as well as the topic of predictive programming, which I think we have touched on in previous editions of the podcast, but we've never really explored it to any sort of length, so we'll be doing that today with Tom. With all that being said, Tom, welcome to the podcast, and how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, and thanks for having me on the podcast again.
Certainly, it was great to have you on last time, and we really look forward to talking to you again. So, to kick us off, if you don't mind, I'd just like to bring up this article that you wrote for our website. Very interesting article. I really enjoyed it, and I hope the readers out there are as well. Could you just let us know what motivated you to write about this particular topic and just kind of break down what it's all about for our listeners?
Well, I mean, what motivated me was this is an area I've been looking increasingly into over the last year or so, that kind of came out of my 7/7 research, in as much as with 7/7 you have this issue of the attacks themselves, as well as lots of different theories about the attacks being predicted or preempted in various television programs. And one of the things I was particularly interested in looking at is what's the relationship between the intelligence agencies and the mass media, both in terms of the news media and the entertainment media. And we now know in quite a lot of detail about this CIA operation called Operation Mockingbird, which ran from the late 40s, before the CIA even really existed, back when it was the old OSS. And it involved essentially recruiting editors and journalists from various newspapers, both within America and abroad, to both feed information to the CIA and to print information that was useful to them. Print propaganda, in effect. And this is something that, you can now read about it on Wikipedia. It's not a controversial thing to say that this was what they did. But what I'm sort of trying to figure out, both historically and in the present, is, or rather, I'm trying to figure out what's going on now, and using sort of historical research methods and what bits and pieces you can get from the present day, to put all this together and try and figure out what's this mutated into. And one of the things it's mutated into is the CIA's Hollywood liaisons. In particular, my article details this guy called Chase Brandon, who was appointed in the mid-1990s as like the CIA's official kind of go-between with Hollywood producers and television producers. And he's since been directly involved in the production of various films and various television shows, all portraying the CIA in a very heroic and gung-ho kind of a light. And in particular, I was interested, and I know you were interested in this guy, that he was the guy who approached Jennifer Garner, the star of the CIA-based show Alias,
Yes,
to appear in a CIA recruitment ad. So you have a woman who plays a spy in what's in effect a piece of CIA propaganda, then being kind of recycled as a celebrity to draw positive attention to the CIA and get people trying to apply for jobs with them.
Like you said, is that stretching out into the entertainment world? Is it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's gone, and that's what I meant by the mutation of Operation Mockingbird, is what I think largely started out as just a thing where they were trying to get useful bits of stuff about foreign policy, for example, into foreign newspapers, has now evolved into this much more sort of complex and sophisticated thing, whereby, like I say, if you think about the kind of different degrees of collusion in that relationship between the CIA and Jennifer Garner, it's a really quite a complex phenomenon. It's not a simplistic thing that they're doing here. It's quite subtle, it's quite intelligent.
Yeah, you wouldn't match them up, just out of the blue, you wouldn't put them two together, but then here we go, here's an advert for him.
Well, I think it's a huge victory on the part of intelligence services that what they've been able to do through the use of film and television program and otherwise is create this kind of romanticized version of what they do. And of course, you go into that in your article, Tom.
Predictive programming, yeah, it's just basically the idea that if there is a planned forthcoming event or an expected event or a inevitable kind of outcome of a current trend, or I don't know, a acceleration of a current trend that is expected or planned for the future, that you would use various different forms of culture, books, films, TV, radio, whatever, to seed the idea before it becomes kind of a manifest reality, and also to condition people's responses to it when it happens. And in particular, who do they hold responsible? Who or what do they blame for the bad things that happen in the world in particular? Because that's kind of how it's used in a malevolent way, is so that, as I said, with 7/7, you have a whole bunch of different TV programs, not just fictional ones, some sort of reality TV type shows as well, in the period between 9/11 and 7/7, a sort of continuous stream of these predictions of the 7/7 event, in particular the official version of Muslim suicide bombers, but also quite a lot of the alternative theories that have come up around 7/7 involving training exercises in particular, is one that they really put that idea out there before 7/7 even happened, and not just in sort of one program in a kind of innocuous way. It was in multiple programs, sometimes as a kind of central thesis in the episode or in the film. So that's why I think it's a real phenomenon, is just because if you look at this and you understand how mass culture should work in an organic way, i.e. where everyone's kind of nicking ideas off each other and developing little spins on it, and everyone's sort of competing for innovation, then what you shouldn't see is one broadcaster, the BBC, having a total monopoly on all programs that in some way predicted 7/7, and that process being quite thorough in both advancing the official conspiracy theory and a whole bunch of kind of distracting alternative conspiracy theories. That shouldn't happen in a sort of organic cultural process. That's anomalous, if you know what I'm saying.
Well, it sounds far-fetched, doesn't it? But it's an impossible coincidence in reality.
You can't say this happens, because it doesn't. What would happen, for example, if this was an organic process, is there would be one BBC show that predicted a Muslim suicide bombing in Britain, and then Channel 4 would nick the idea, and they'd put out their own show about this. That didn't happen. The BBC had a total monopoly on this process, and they are
just the BBC.
After all, yeah, all of the programs that I talk about, all BBC.
Good evening, Rowan. It's the 7th of May 2016, and it's about 1 AM. And obviously I'm making you my usual video before the weekend to reassure you I won't be seducing any priests. Anyway, I thought we could have a chat about the London bombings this evening, because I have mentioned it before, that not only were you allegedly in Manhattan on 9/11, so you could be filling our heads full of propaganda about that, but you were also in West Yorkshire on the day of the London bombings, on the 7th of July 2005. Now, it transpired that the alleged terrorists were from West Yorkshire. There were supposed to be 4 of them, and all 4 of them were supposed to be from Leeds, which is in West Yorkshire. And you were in West Yorkshire. Not only were you in West Yorkshire, you were at a Muslim establishment, which later in the year, at a lecture you gave in France, you described as being one of the largest Islamic establishments, I think you said, in the north of England, and you kept referring to it as a madrasa, which is in fact only the Arabic word for school, but tends to be used to refer to an Islamic school by people who are not native Arabic speakers. But in any case, you weren't at a madrasa at all. You visited a mosque. It was the Medina Mosque in Batley, and you also visited the Al-Hikmah Centre there, which is a kind of community centre which is owned and run by the Indian Muslim Welfare Society. So that's where you were on the morning of the 7th of July 2005, and the reason you were there, in my opinion, was so that you could be programming people already to associate the London bombings with Muslims from West Yorkshire. Because really, for people in Britain, if someone blew up the London Underground, this was way back in 2005, the IRA had only just been retired by Tony Blair, so the globalists could then bring in Al-Qaeda in 2001 with 9/11. So there we have Tony Blair involved in that there as well, appointed Prime Minister of the United Kingdom at the Bilderberg Group in 1993. The only reason he could even become the leader of the Labour Party, so he was eligible to be Prime Minister if the Labour Party was elected, the only reason that could happen was because of the sudden death of his predecessor, John Smith, which occurred at the end of May, I can't remember the exact date, in 1994, and he died in the morning of a heart attack, and there was a programme made about him in the evening for tributes to him after the BBC 9 o'clock news, and so the 9 o'clock news would have lasted from 9 o'clock till 9:30, and then on the day that John Smith died, Tony Blair's predecessor as the leader of the Labour Party, he died that morning of a heart attack, and then in the evening a programme was cancelled to make way for tributes to him on the BBC after the 9 o'clock news, and the programme that was cancelled was called Cardiac Arrest. So there we are. Tony Blair went to the Bilderberg Group in 1993, and his predecessor as leader of the Labour Party died suddenly of a heart attack in May 1994, and the programme cancelled to make way for tributes for him the same day that he died was called Cardiac Arrest. So you can make of that what you will. I suppose it's another one of those coincidences, like your clocks all showing 9/11. So anyway, yes, so they don't stop at anything, they just kill people off left, right and centre. There were people dropping dead all around the Clintons, and probably still are. You're big fans of the Clintons, aren't you? That's why you spend all your time criticising Donald Trump and implying things that he's said things that he obviously hasn't said, otherwise you'd be taking great delight in quoting them, wouldn't you? So anyway, there you were on the 7th of July 2005 at the Medina Mosque in Batley and at the Al-Hikmah Centre, which is a community centre run by the Indian Muslim Welfare Society. And there aren't any videos or audios of you talking about this that I've been able to find, but there are transcripts on the Archbishop of Canterbury website about statements that you made, and I'm going to put some slides of these statements throughout this video and also at the end of the video. So we've just had the clip explaining about predictive programming, and this is what I think your role was in being in West Yorkshire on the morning of the 7th of July 2005. So the first thing is a statement that was released that day on the Archbishop of Canterbury website, the 7th of July 2005, and the first thing it says is, speaking on an interfaith visit to West Yorkshire, Dr. Williams. So we've already got the mention of West Yorkshire there, and then the first thing you say is, as it happens, I have spent this morning with Muslim colleagues in West Yorkshire. Well, you're already implying that it was Muslims who blew up the London Underground there, because as I've said, British people would generally associate bombs going off on the British mainland, in England at least, and particularly in London and around the south, would generally associate a bomb going off, or bombs going off like that, the first thing they'd think of was the IRA, which is why Tony Blair had to retire the IRA in 1998, so Al-Qaeda could be rolled out as the new bogeyman. Now, probably you think I'm crazy about that. Well, you don't think I'm crazy because you know it's true, but you'll say that I'm crazy because your whole purpose is to discredit me, so that I can't blow the whistle on you, which is what you've been doing for over 2 decades now. But MI5 were supplying the IRA with weapons. They were videoing people abusing children in a children's home in Ireland to try and get material to blackmail Irish politicians, Northern Irish politicians, and the MI5 infiltrated the IRA. Now, as I understand it, active cells of the IRA used to sit round on their meetings with a bag over their head, and nobody knew who the other people in the meeting were. So, if everybody sat there with a bag over their head and nobody knows who the other people in the meeting are, then perhaps all of the people in the meeting were MI5 operatives. So the IRA was manipulated by MI5, by the intelligence agencies, in the same way that Al-Qaeda is, which was only a database, originally, Al-Qaeda, of CIA operatives in Afghanistan, and Osama bin Laden worked for the CIA, so he was working for the same people as you, Rowan, before his death of kidney failure. So if he's a war criminal, and those are the words that came out of your mouth, if he's a war criminal, then you must be as well, since you're both working for the same people. So there you were, outside this mosque, or visiting this mosque and Muslim centre in West Yorkshire, and the first thing you say in your statement about the London bombings: as it happens, I have spent this morning with Muslim colleagues in West Yorkshire. So we've already got the London bombings associated with Muslims from West Yorkshire, and one of the purposes of predictive programming is that it's to make people introduce people to ideas that might be new to them, because, as I've said, people on the British mainland would normally associate, back in 2005, they would have been associating bombs going off with the IRA. We didn't have Al-Qaeda in Britain in 2005. Well, we still haven't got Al-Qaeda in Britain, it's a load of nonsense. But there you were, to plant this seed in people's ideas, because it's a bit like when you're weaning a child. You've got to keep reintroducing new food to them over and over again, because they always reject it the first time that you offer them this food, and you've got to keep reintroducing new foods to them in small portions over and over again before the child will accept the food. And it's the same for adults and people of all ages accepting new ideas. Things that run contrary to what we believe already, we tend to reject, and they have to keep being presented to us over and over again, and it makes it more palatable in the same way as for a child being introduced to new foods when it's first been weaned. So this is the purpose of predictive programming, to keep reintroducing ideas to people, to introduce them and reintroduce them so that they're more palatable. And a good way to do this is through fiction, because people suspend their critical faculties, they suspend disbelief when they're reading or watching or listening to fiction. But it's not only in fiction, it's also in news broadcasts and in statements made by certain Archbishops of Canterbury. So that's why I had the clip at the beginning about predictive programming, and this is my view of what you were doing in West Yorkshire at a Muslim establishment on the 7th of July 2005. So that was your statement on the day. I'm going to show it more completely later on, the whole statement I mean. But then you didn't just leave it there, because then on the 8th of July 2005 you were parachuted in to BBC Radio 4's Thought for the Day, which is a programme where generally a religious leader, but sometimes it's a secular person now, but it tends to be a religious leader like a bishop or a rabbi or someone like that, gives a little reflection in the morning, and it's only a couple of minutes long. So you were parachuted into Thought for the Day, being obviously the most important religious leader in Britain, on the public scene anyway. It's a pity you were working for Lucifer, but never mind. Anyway, so here's a couple of things that you said in Thought for the Day on the 8th of July 2005, the morning after the London bombings. So you say, the terrorist goal is a situation in which our fear of violence and our grief and pain over violence have become stronger than our positive hopes and commitments. Well, this is true, isn't it? You're actually telling us the truth here. The only thing that is a lie is that you're talking as if someone else were the terrorist, but in fact you are the terrorist, aren't you? Because you're terrorising people with all this propaganda and predictive programming and mind control. And this is, you're telling them what the terrorist goal is, you're just not telling them who the terrorist is, and it's you. So you then go on to say, for most of the last 2 weeks the thoughts of millions of people have been focused on the G8 meeting. Well, the G8 meeting was actually taking place in Britain at the time, although it wasn't in London, it was in Gleneagles. And so a huge amount of, very important world leaders were there, including Tony Blair, and George W. Bush was there as well. So there were all these important leaders on hand to be making crappy statements about the London bombings, so I'm sure that wasn't planned at all. And then of course Tony Blair had to rush back from that to save the day. That was sarcasm, by the way. Anyway. So you're saying here that the people were focusing on the G8 meeting. Well, I don't know who was focusing on it, I wasn't focusing on it, but there you are. So anyway, you go on to say, people knew what they wanted: justice for the poor, firm promises to address the environmental crisis. So you've got to get in your globalist redistribution of wealth, worldwide redistribution of wealth, which basically means robbing the West, and firm promises to address the environmental crisis. So even when a bomb goes off on the London Underground, you've still got to get a plug-in for the environmental crisis, haven't you? The bogus environmental crisis, which in 2005 you still had 7 years to have the Church of England disinvest in fossil fuel companies, and you did absolutely nothing about it. So there you are. So people knew what they wanted: justice for the poor, firm promises to address the environmental crisis. They wanted to be able to be proud of themselves and their leaders. Well, I just don't know what you're talking about here, Rowan. Is this the Borg that you're talking about? Why would I be proud of my leaders? I haven't got any leaders, I'm an adult. I make my own mind up about things. Why would I need to be proud of my leaders? They're completely irrelevant to me. people want to be proud of their leaders. What a lot of nonsense this is. It's total nonsense. It's just you. You want to be lording it over everybody and telling them what to think and in control of everybody. You particularly wanted to be in control of me, didn't you, because you couldn't stand it. But you've done this to other people as well, and at a more abstract political level you want to be in control as well. And that was one of the speeches you gave, wasn't it, in Copenhagen, when you went to the UN Climate Summit there in 2009, where they were hoping to bring in a world government, but luckily people blew the whistle on them and it didn't work out. But you are on video, and I've showed it already on the Copenhagen collection, saying, "We've come here to tell our leaders to lead," which really what you're saying is, enslave us, enslave us. I don't need any leaders to lead. I'm a grown-up and I can make my own decisions, and I'd really prefer it without other people interfering with me, particularly psychopaths like you. So the people wanted to be able to be proud of themselves and their leaders. They wanted to be confident that this was a world where moral vision and power still worked. So what you're saying is the leaders are full of moral vision and moral power. They're the moral people. The leaders are the moral people, and then these nasty terrorists have come in and disrupted this otherwise moral world by blowing up the London Underground, which was a hoax, by the way, but I won't go into that right now. Anyway, so then you go on to say, and then on Wednesday we had that great vote of confidence in London. This was the 2012 Olympics being awarded to London. So that's a nice lot of debt we've acquired because of that, isn't it? I'd personally have preferred it if they'd just kind of divided up the money that they were going to spend on the London Olympics and handed it out to every citizen in Britain, which would have done us more good, than rather than we're still paying it off now and will be just about forever. And then on Wednesday we had that great vote of confidence in London. Once again, hopes and commitments were in the air and people were being stirred by new possibilities. This is more of your noise pollution, isn't it? It sounds really impressive, but it doesn't actually mean anything. So, you go on to say, we're still on thought for the day here. So yesterday's atrocities could not have come at a crueller moment. In addition to the terrible fact of plain human loss and suffering, there's the sense of a kind of defiant insult being flung out of all of this. And just as there are insults that leave us as individuals feeling too sick and empty to respond, so there are moments when a whole society feels like that. So you're programming people here how to think and feel, and rather than giving people words of encouragement, you rush in there and tell them to feel insulted and too sick and empty to respond, and this is how the whole of society should feel. I don't think we did feel like that, to be honest, Rowan. Most of us just got on with things. We don't like people planting bombs and all that kind of thing, and we particularly don't like people like you being in control of everything. So I think most people in Britain just got on with it. That's what British people do. We're very resilient. I mean, that's the globalists are trying to undermine that now by having everybody focusing on how they're feeling about everything all the time, and trying to make people become very introspective instead of just adhering to their values and developing resilience. And then you go on to say, an Old Testament prophet spoke these words, "How doth the city sit solitary that was full of people?" Well, this is from chapter 1 of the book of Lamentations. You're making it sound like a prophecy, but it's in fact a book of poems lamenting over Jerusalem. And you only give this part of the quotation. You often do this, you quote only half a verse and it's out of context. But this is quite interesting to read the whole thing. What you quote this, how doth the city sit solitary that was full of people? This is Lamentations chapter 1 verse 1. Of course you don't tell us that. And then you say, he spoke them as he looked over the ruins of his home and the bodies of his friends. So that's a nice cheery thought, isn't it? To cheer everyone up and encourage them the day after an alleged terrorist attack. But this is the whole of that verse anyway, which you don't give. How doth the city sit solitary that was full of people? How is she become as a widow? She that was great among the nations, and princess among the provinces. How she is become tributary. So you're talking actually about the demise of Britain here, aren't you? Which has been deliberately engineered. Not that I'm saying the British Empire was a good thing at all, but we were a much stronger nation than we are now, and we've become impoverished through the Rothschilds taking over the Bank of England, basically, and manipulating the political system. So you can make another video now accusing me of being anti-Semitic, and I suppose that I'm anti-Irish as well now as well. But before you make a fool of yourself making a video accusing me of being anti-Irish, I would just like to tell you that I used to share a house with Martin McGuinness's cousin in London, so just don't bother with the Irish thing. So I've shared a house with a Jew and with Martin McGuinness's cousin, so just don't bother coming out with any crap about that because you're very tiring. Anyway, so that was the whole of the verse, which I think you're alluding to the demise of Britain as part of the globalist world takeover. So you then go on to say, but that sick desolation is what the terrorist wants. Well, it's what you want because you're the terrorist, and it's what you want because you're a psychopath as well. You like engineering sick desolation in other people because it makes you feel powerful. You've got a lust for power, and I'm using the word lust in its literalistic sense here. You're a very lustful person. You've got a lust for power over other people, and you do want sick desolation in other people, and that's what you've tried to engineer in my life over and over again, just because you wanted me to either kill myself or come under your control, and that's why you engineered all these catastrophes in my life. So when you say that sick desolation is what the terrorist wants, you're speaking as the terrorist. You're speaking as a psychopath. And then you go on to say, if our passion for justice, renewal, reconciliation is silenced, the path is open to whatever distorted and inhuman agenda is ready to fill the gap. Yes, well, this is the purpose of globalist intervention in countries, isn't it? To really take down whatever their strength is and create chaos, so that they can seize all the assets and kill all the people off and put in a puppet government and control everything. And also, I mean, this is what you've done to me as well, isn't it? And I would point out as well that since you do broadcast to me over the airwaves, that this was only a year after you'd had me thrown out of St Michael's Church in a grotesquely unjust fashion, where you were gaslighting me and blaming me for just about everything that had ever gone wrong in the church in the last 2,000 years. That's what it actually felt like at the time, which is of course what you intended. So if our passion for justice, renewal, reconciliation is silenced, the path is open to whatever distorted and inhuman agenda is ready to fill the gap. So, well, you talked in your article, didn't you, in the New Statesman, which I commented on Monday, about taking people down with repeated acts of petty spite, and I said that that's what you'd done to me. and it is a satanic attack against me that you've orchestrated. You've sold your soul to Satan, and this is Satan attacking me through you, and through this whole situation that I'm in now, that people are pretending is intended to help me, but the real agenda of it is to demoralise and destroy me and take me over to the power of Satan, to make me sell myself the same way that you've sold yourself, by causing me so much suffering and despair at all the injustice that I face, that I'm going to sell out the same way that you have. This is what this has all been about. It's never been to help me. It's just repeated attack after attack after attack after attack, and defaming me and terrorising me, in order that I'll just give up hope and despair. It'll never work, Rowan, because I've got an eternity in heaven to look forward to. I can't live to be more than 100, you know, and I've survived nearly 50 years already. So I've got eternity in heaven to look forward to, and I know that that's true. I know it's true. I don't have to believe it's true. You can't possibly destroy my belief, because it's not a belief, it's knowledge. So you're wasting your time. I did say that God had united with my soul a long time ago, and that you're in fact attacking God Almighty when you attack me, because God is united already in my soul. I'm not saying that I am God, so don't make a video about that. But the point is that God works in the soul, and the soul becomes transformed to share more of the nature of God, as I explained reading from St John of the Cross before, using the symbol of an ember, how the fire and the coal become one. The coal is transformed into fire, and you can no longer separate the two. Because even though the fire and the coal are not identical, they've become so united that they can't be separated. And I also said that if you keep on blowing on an ember, you can't blow it out. You can't blow an ember out, you only make it shine more brilliantly. I did tell you that quite a long time ago as well. So you say, if our passion for justice, renewal, reconciliation is silenced, the path is open to whatever distorted and inhuman agenda is ready to fill the gap. Well, my passion for justice, renewal and reconciliation is never going to be silenced, but if you think that means I'm making friends with you or having anything to do with you, you can forget it, because you're a psychopath, and I said no, and you've got no right to demand that I involve myself with you. I do not owe you a single thing. I've never done anything wrong to you. I don't owe you anything, and you act with a great sense of entitlement. You have no entitlement at all. I will never have anything to do with you. Anyway, I'm going to show these slides now, and then I'm going to come back and make another comment on something else that you said later on in July 2005. So I'm now going on to talk briefly about the presidential address she gave at the General Synod of the Church of England on the 11th of July 2005, which is a few days after the London bombings, which were on the 7th of July, and the day before police raids took place at various addresses in West Yorkshire. So there was still no reason for anybody to be associating what took place in London with Muslims from West Yorkshire. And if people had been thinking about Muslims at the time, which we were all being programmed to think by useful idiots like you, if people had been thinking of Muslims at the time, they would be thinking of foreigners really, like supposedly perpetrated 9/11, mostly Saudis it was supposed to be. So that was who we would have been imagining were doing it, even if we'd been thinking of Muslims, which we wouldn't have been thinking of if we hadn't been programmed so much in the media to think about Muslims, and people saying things like this is all the hallmarks of Al-Qaeda, which Tom Secker said virtually every terrorist group that's existed since the London Underground was built has tried at some point to blow it up. So there was no reason at all to associate the London bombings with Al-Qaeda, with Muslims from anywhere, and particularly not with Muslims from West Yorkshire. So here's what you say. Last Thursday, the horrifying news about the London bombings broke just as I was arriving in Batley in West Yorkshire. Well, I don't think it was confirmed, supposedly, that bombs had gone off until about 11 o'clock. I've looked on the timeline, and up until that point, people were speculating as to what had happened, and I think the initial reports, I know the initial reports were that a power surge had taken place. So there was no confirmed report of a terrorist attack until 11 o'clock. I think Scotland Yard confirmed a bus had blown up at about 10:30, but this wasn't really released in the media until 11 o'clock. And you do say that you set off very early. On another occasion you say you set off very early to get to West Yorkshire. Well, you can't have set off that early from London if you didn't get there until 11 o'clock. That's quite late in the day to be starting meetings. Well, it is if you've got a proper job anyway. So, last Thursday, the horrifying news about the London bombings broke just as I was arriving in Batley in West Yorkshire for a day of visits to local Islamic institutions and meetings with clergy in the area who are involved in interfaith encounters. It proved to be an extraordinary opportunity for saying things about the absolutely routine nature of friendly and lively relationships between Muslims and Christians in a good many parts of the UK. I'm not sure what a lively relationship is. It's more of your noise pollution, isn't it? Things which have informed our discussions here about presence and engagement. I suppose that's got something to do with Church of England presence in various communities around Britain, around England anyway, and which we shall all need to be heard saying quite a lot in the days ahead, when the temptation to scapegoat our Muslim neighbours may be strong for some in our communities. So here you are, the voice of reason, informing your colleagues there in the Church of England about all the reconciling work they were going to have to do. It's so important, you see, that people aren't scapegoating Muslims. And here I am programming you already to think that it was Muslims from West Yorkshire who did it, when there's never been any inquiry, and even if there had been an inquiry there wouldn't have been one by the 11th of July, only a few days after the event had taken place. So you're already programming people to think that it was Muslims who did it, to associate the event with Muslims from West Yorkshire, and then this is more gaslighting. You're telling the people here at the General Synod, people who make all the decisions about what takes place in the Church of England as a whole, you know, what new liturgies to have and whether to have women priests or not, and all this kind of thing. The General Synod makes all these decisions, so these are kind of the most powerful people in the Church of England, at the national level anyway, and you're telling them how important all their reconciling work with Muslims and with irrational people who are going to be scapegoating Muslims for this event, and you're the one who's telling us that they did it and programming us to make it less likely that we'll react back and say, well, that doesn't sound true, and programming us so we won't say, well, it's usually the IRA that blows up the London Underground, and programming us so we'll just accept this official narrative of what took place without any legal proceedings or criminal proceedings or an investigation. I mean, the police investigated a bit, well, but there was no inquiry, and those people have never been found guilty in court. Well, they're supposed to be dead, aren't they? But it's never been established in court or in any inquiry that those people they told us blew up the London Underground actually blew it up. And in fact, it's not even really established that any terrorist attack actually took place and that it wasn't a gigantic psyop. None of this has ever been established. There's a remarkable lack of bloodstains on that bus that's supposed to have 13 people blown to bits on it. So you're just there programming us to associate it with Muslims from West Yorkshire, and even the most ardent dogmatic atheist who would think normally that the Archbishop of Canterbury must be crazy to believe in the sky fairy and all this kind of things that atheists say, not all of them but some of them, but you know, they might think that someone's crazy for apparently being a Christian even though you're not, and you know, kind of walking around in fancy dress and all that kind of thing. They might think you were crazy, but not a single person would think, oh, he's going to be lying about 9/11. He wasn't in Manhattan, it didn't happen like that. He wouldn't be working for the intelligence agencies, he wouldn't be a globalist puppet. They would never think about that, they would never think that the Archbishop of Canterbury was in that position. They might believe it of people in the media or politicians, but they wouldn't think it about the Archbishop of Canterbury, and that's why you were in such a perfect spot. Because when you said dumb things about Sharia law and Osama bin Laden and that kind of thing, people just thought you were an idiot and you were out of touch with reality, the people who didn't agree with you. But nobody would ever think that you were actually manipulating people's perception of events and distracting their attention from the real questions that they should be asking. So it's a perfect position to be in, or at least it was up until now, being Archbishop of Canterbury, to be making garbage statements like this and working to bring in a Luciferian global New World Order that wants to get rid of most of us and enslave all the rest. So that would have been something to look forward to, wouldn't it? Anyway, I've waffled on for an awful long time. I think this will be my longest video ever. So I'll leave it there for now, but don't worry, I won't be seducing any priests. And I've got more to say on the London bombings on Sunday evening about a lecture that you gave later in the year on the very subject. I was going to do it this evening, but as you can see I've gone on far too long as it is, so I'll leave it there. Hasta la próxima.